Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and look, thanks to Yalman Bira for the welcome to country and the timely reminder to us all of the importance of respect and flexibility in the work that we all do. And welcome everybody to the beautiful city of Albury. There's actually 270 people attending this year, and we also have 25 exhibitors, and so I certainly appreciate you all finding time in your busy schedules to be able to come together and convene to actually deal with some really, really important issues for not just your services and for the people you care for, but I'd argue really important issues for the nation. And whilst we thank HESTA for their support for this event and their continuing contribution in partnership to the work that we do, I'd also like to thank them for their thought leadership, addressing a number of issues that are important to our sector. And again, getting back to the point I wish to impress upon you, is important to the nation. Because I'd argue that this year is going to be a landmark year for the issues of ageing and aged care in our country. The Aged Care Royal Commission's final report is due out in November, and by all accounts, what they will be recommending will be a fundamentally different system for how we enable and support the growing numbers of older Australians. Whilst at the same time, 2020 will see the United Nations launch a decade of healthy ageing. So across the world, there'll be a focus for the next 10 years on how communities, societies, governments, and indeed nations best respond to the global phenomenon of an ageing population. And put all that together, that's why the conference here today, the focus is around ageing well from policy to practice. And certainly looking forward to hearing from some of the leading thinkers and doers that we've assembled to help us reimagine what that might actually look like. I've got to say, being here in Albury brings back a number of personal memories for me. I've got a strong connection to this place. As an infant, I spent a number of years here in Albury, but also in other local communities, Tumut and Talbingo, and they all hold a special place in my heart. But I've got to tell you, I also know from a traumatic personal experience what it's like to live through a bushfire. And with this in mind, our hearts go out to all of those individuals and families and communities nearby, but also in other areas of Australia that have been impacted by the bushfires, and particularly those who have tragically lost loved ones. And whilst there's been significant threat and impact of bushfires on many aged care operators and retirement villages, thankfully we haven't seen any loss of life in those settings. And with this in mind, I've got to tell you, my heart has swelled with pride when I've heard countless stories of people that work in our sector that have done amazingly selfless acts to stand by the beds and to visit the people in their homes and to protect them through bushfires, often forsaking their own either personal safety or the protection of their own homes. It was interesting, I was talking to a LASA member in the Illawarra recently, and he said to me, their stories of heroism are humbling. And look, there are many of those such stories, and certainly looking forward to catching up with Anne Brewer from the Buchan Bush Nursing Centre, who'll be participating in our panel tomorrow on emergency responses in the bushfires. Anne basically lost her house in the fires, but at the same time she continued to deliver all important care in her community. We also have Sandy Grieve from the Walwa Bush Nursing Centre, who shared her community's story of survival in the recent bushfires in an online article. And Sandy finished her story with a classic quote. It said, "Love and kisses to those other centres impacted by these fires. Bloody lucky we're a tough bunch." And nothing like telling it how it is, Sandy. So looking forward to that session tomorrow. Look, this forum also includes LASA members who had to evacuate their facilities, and also some Department of Health people. I just think it's really, really important that we take the time to learn lessons from these disasters, because let's be honest, folks, they're going to be with us for some time to come. And there's nothing more important than making sure that we're prepared and that we minimise the loss of, obviously, of life and threat to facilities and communities. But look, you know yourself, it's not just bushfires that are impacting on providers and aged services. I could rattle off the list. It's ongoing financial challenges in residential care. There's workforce pressures everywhere you look. The long wait times for home care packages in communities. Recent regulatory changes that are causing considerable stress and pressure. All of those things on aged care providers. And all of this is going on with the backdrop of a Royal Commission. And whilst we're all doing all that, what are you out there doing? Well, all you want to do is deliver the best possible care that you can. And I've got to tell you, I'm acutely aware of how harder this is becoming. So with this in mind, we've been putting here at LASA significant focus into ensuring our members do have that strong voice to represent your views on issues of importance, and also that helping hand to assist you in these times of challenge and change. And as I've said many times before, the issues of ageing and aged care are issues of national importance, and how we care speaks to who we are as a nation. And that's why the work that you, our members, do must be valued and must be supported. Now, the Royal Commission's interim report released last year has drawn a line in the sand for our sector, for our aged care system, and indeed the nation. The report sets out a case for fundamental change, a rethink of how our nation addresses ageing and aged care in Australia. Now, this is, as I've said before, a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us to get this right, but that opportunity comes with a great responsibility, and it's a responsibility that is compelling us to get this right for older Australians now and into the future. Now, whilst the Royal Commission goes about its important work and we look towards the inevitable transformational changes that will follow, it's our responsibility individually and collectively to show leadership right now. And let me tell you that our approach to this is quite simple. We've committed to be more in 2020. So we're going to be more accountable, more assertive, more expansive, and more collaborative in the service of our members, and indeed in realising better aged care system for older Australians. So when I talk about accountability, I'll touch on this a little bit later on when I present a session on our membership charter. But it's fair to say that the recent reforms and what the Aged Care Commission is telling us is that we, as services and as a sector, need to be more accountable. Older Australians, their carers, their advocates are demanding this, and the community expects nothing less. That is why all of us have this increased focus, and all of us need to be able to demonstrate the quality, the safety, and the value of what we deliver. With regards to being more assertive, our approach to advocacy has been deliberately more assertive as we seek to influence the decision makers to address the critical issues that are affecting our members and indeed older Australians that you care for and support. And as again, I can rattle off whether it's funding for residential aged care, whether it's workforce issues, whether it's home care wait lists, all of these issues are important, and all of these are impacting on the work you do today. And all of these things are things that we could do, we could address right now that would make the aged care system better right now. And so heading towards the May budget and beyond, rest assured that we'll continue with our assertive approach to bring focus, influence, evidence and balance to our advocacy in seeking to influence decision makers in a way that will make your jobs easier and that will deliver better outcomes for older people. When I talk about being more expansive, to further back our case for greater support for aged care, we're also expanding the things that we talk about publicly. For example, we're calling the nation out following the lead of the Royal Commission on ageism, on respect for our elders, and on the inconvenient truths of ageing in Australia. And that is that notwithstanding the unfolding and significant shifts in demographics in Australia as our population ages, the Royal Commission found, and let me quote this, as a nation, Australia has drifted into an ageist mindset that undervalues older people and limits their possibilities. Now, I'd argue that this represents missed opportunities for us as a nation, both economically and socially, and also gets back to the point I made earlier that how we care for older people speaks to who we are as a nation. And I don't think there'd be anybody in this room would say, well, we're happy to live in an ageist society that either consciously or unconsciously biases against those older people in our communities. And the reality is that Australia's reached a new normal with regards to the number of older people in our communities. And whilst our population ages, we're presented with a plethora of issues that are calling out for national leadership and national action that effectively addresses ageism and abuse in all its forms. But you see in the news every week now, whether it's ageism, elder abuse, retirement ages, retirement incomes, intergenerational equity, housing ownership, all of these issues are just symptoms of what's actually going on, which is us not dealing as a nation with an ageing population. And then finally to say that to be more collaborative, if we're going to realise the outcomes that we truly desire as an aged care sector, but also as a country in better responding to the needs of the growing numbers of older Australians, we need to do this together. We can't continue to operate in silos, fragmented, under-resourced, in ways that, notwithstanding the best efforts, are not getting the outcomes that we want for older Australians or for our members or indeed for the nation. And so whilst what I would argue is that the Royal Commission is going to recommend a transformational approach to aged care in Australia, I'd argue that this will require an equally transformational approach for how we represent and how we develop the aged care sector. And that'll compel all of us, the peak bodies, all the operators, to actually sit down and explore new and better ways to overcome the fragmentation of voice and the suboptimal resourcing and the competitive tensions that we find within our sector. And whilst we're out there being more accountable, assertive, expansive and collaborative, let me tell you we're also continuing to provide support for our members on key issues. Specifically through our new National Centre for Workforce Development and Innovation, there are a suite of programs we've developed to deal with key issues around expanding the rural and remote workforce, uplifting governance and compliance standards, looking at better ways for dementia care, improving customer support and service, and realising better quality food and nutrition. And I'm very pleased that we're about to launch a new national mentoring program that aims to support emerging leaders in aged services by partnering with them and bringing them into a partnership with established leaders in a facilitated and formalised mentoring program. It's an Australian first for our sector, and we believe it'll help future-proof the industry. So this 5-month mentoring program complements and streamlines existing professional development opportunities and systems you might have in place. It's a key way to give emerging leaders one-on-one support and guidance to actually help them to build skills and confidence and capacity in their work and start plotting out a career path for them in a sector that says to them, well, we value you, we value the work you do, and we actually want you to see you continue to commit and have an outstanding, rewarding career in our sector. And look, with workforce, it would be remiss of me not to mention the Royal Commission's workforce hearing last Friday. Hands up who watched the Commission. Did anybody get the reports on what was recommended? Only a few hands. Okay. Well, at this hearing, the Council assisting put forward to the Commissioners a number of recommendations and with regards to what we might do differently or better in supporting our workforce. And in a nutshell, the recommendations align to LASA's ongoing calls for more staff, for better skills and qualifications, and for appropriate remuneration for aged care workers. Because as you know yourself, getting workforce right is fundamental to getting care right. And we need more staff who are valued, who are supported, and who are accountable. And Council Assisting's pathway, Council Assisting's recommendations actually give us a pathway now to realise just this. Having said that, they also asserted that if we're going to have more staff, have them better skilled and qualified and pay them more money, guess what? The current funding system needs to be overhauled in order to be able to accommodate that. And we do note that part of the solution put forward by Council Assisting was the introduction of mandatory minimum staff to resident ratios in residential care. Now, when we respond to this recommendation, as we will put forward an alternative approach that we believe will be more appropriate, more flexible and more successful in realising better outcomes for older Australians in care, rather than just looking to rely on a minimum staff to resident ratio. So look, in closing, let me just say, congratulations to the 17 individuals and organisations that are the finalists in our Excellence in Aged Services Awards. I wish you all well for tomorrow's awards ceremony. And as we kick off Tri-State for 2020, I want to remind you of the words of a key Royal Commission witness, Dr. Lisa Trigg. Now, Dr. Trigg gave evidence in 2019, and her parting advice to the commissioners was that they will not necessarily find the answers to our aged care problems from studies overseas. Dr. Trigg said, "There are people in this room who know what you need to do. There are people in this room who have the answers, who's been doing this stuff for 10 or 20 years. And I suppose my biggest wish is that those people become the most important people in the system. And they're the people who will guide your work in what this needs to look like." So I've said before, providers of aged services must be seen as part of the solution and not all of the problem. We have the answers, and it's our opportunity and indeed our responsibility to ensure that we bring forward these solutions in the service of older Australians and the nation. So thank you very much for your time. Looking forward to Congress 2020.